it. Our guest is retired Brigadier John Waweru. He's the Director General of the Kenya Wildlife Service. Good morning and welcome to the studio, sir.
Good morning. And
it's good to have you. Very well, thank you.
Yes.
It's good to have a former military officer in the studio, and as CT says, the truth is what you went through, and also what you take the KWS Rangers through.
Absolutely. That is exactly what they have to go through. So I totally agree with Charles. It's true. If you don't, we have a way we coined it in the military where you had to remove the civilian out of the person so that you introduce the discipline into the person. So that's the only way you're going to get this person. Because naturally, if somebody fires a shot at you, what is the first thing you want to do? Run away in the opposite direction. That's the natural thing to do.
Flight.
But when you now see the military person going towards where the shot came from, that tells you there's something else that happened to this person other than the normal. Yeah. Something else was introduced in the system. So
remove the civilian out of the person and introduce discipline.
And introduce the discipline that allows you to be able to engage that enemy going forward.
What you're saying is basically Rayana discipline.
I didn't say that, Eric. That was on your words.
Rayana discipline, yes, but ukiongeza hiyo suffering, so ndio discipline itakuwa discipline kamili.
Proper.
Yes.
It's good to have you in the show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very
welcome. Much. That's a hot seat that you're occupying right there. We like to give our guests that seat so that we can have meaningful conversations with them.
Thank you.
You've been the DG of the Kenya Wildlife Service for a number of years now. One of the reasons why
almost 3 years now.
3 years now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Almost, yeah.
We'll talk about the Kenya Wildlife Service. Many people just see KWS, they understand parks, they know tourists come and they go to the parks.
Yes.
I know there have been very many efforts by yourself, your administration and previous administrations as well at KWS to open up the national parks and our national flora and fauna conservation to the ordinary citizens of this republic. Will tell us about that. But tomorrow is a very important day globally. Yes. Tomorrow is the World Wildlife Day.
Yes.
What's that and what's it about?
Maybe I can explain to you how it came about. On the 16th meeting of the Conference of Parties, and this happened in, I don't know whether you know what CITES is. CITES is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. In a nutshell, without going through a big explanation, it's about the protected iconic species, okay? And this convention our countries are engaged to sign up so that they can be able to protect iconic species. What species are we talking about? We're talking about the elephant, the rhino, some cat species, like the lion. Like now, lions, we only have about 2,500 in Kenya, not more than that. So if we were to destroy that, then we would have no lions left. So those kind of things. And during that meeting, then the World Wildlife Day was declared in 2013. And tomorrow, it's celebrated worldwide. And Kenya will also be celebrating. And this year's theme is recovering the species for ecosystem restoration. Okay, recovering key species for ecosystem restoration. And so that to be able to market in line with that theme, what we will be doing is we'll have a white rhino conservation and management action plan 2021-2025. It will be launched tomorrow. And of course, you know, the white rhino is also an endangered species, just as much as the black rhino is. And that is what we'll be doing tomorrow. And that's why it's so important. Yes.
It's interesting as you talk about restoration, because I mean, one of the first things that you talked about, you know, if we're looking at then the unfortunate destruction of some of these species by, you know, whether it's, you know, absence of care or things like that, or the lack of the realization of their importance in the environment, then preservation and restoration is just as important. I'm interested to know what steps towards restoration of species, for example, have been taken in Kenya. I think of what the Chinese did with the panda, and when it was on the front of extinction, and now they've been able to reintroduce thousands of animals back. what has happened here, or what is happening here with some of the species that you've already earmarked?
Actually, you asked that, and there is something specific that is actually happening around Kenya. And this is to do with the northern white rhino. Remember, there are two white rhino species. There's the northern white rhino and the southern white rhino. At the moment, the northern white rhino, there are only two female rhinos that remain worldwide in Olpajeta. So at the moment, together with partners in the Czech Republic and Italy, scientists and our own scientists, what we're doing is we are trying to get we were able to collect some of the sperm of Sudan before Sudan died. So we are trying to get them back. We want to get a surrogate mother of a southern white rhino so that then we can see if we can restore back the northern white rhino. Because we managed to get some eggs from the two females, the northern white rhino and that of Sudan, put together. They've been doing this for the last 1.5 years. And recently we successfully were able to get an embryo now that actually is fertilized, but of a southern white rhino, because we want to see whether that process will work first and foremost. So we took of the southern white rhino because we don't want to waste the little that we have of Sudan and the northern white rhino females, so that we can then be able to restore that species. Because if we are successful, and we feel we will be successful, that would be a major milestone worldwide of being able to restore a species which, for all intents and purposes, is extinct.
So what is it going to be? So we have an embryo with Sudan, which is northern.
Yes.
And a surrogate mother who is a southern.
But there are two northern white females,
Yes.
which still remain. So the eggs were taken from there, and that of Sudan, the sperm of Sudan, put together in a lab in the Czech Republic, so that once we are able to test the ones of the southern white rhino first to see whether it's successful, then we will now introduce to a surrogate southern white rhino female the sperm of Sudan and the eggs of the northern. Yes, we'll try and get that. Once we get this successful, then we feel confident we'll be able to bring back that species. So that is one of the most important things that we're doing right now.
It's a big milestone.
It's a major one.
How long before we get to know this?
Well, it's a process, and it's a scientific process. So you don't have definite timelines of saying by this time. But we've been trying for the last 2 years now, and there have been times when we've tried and it didn't work. It's been tried before. Sometimes the egg, they crush. So they collapse and you're not able to do that. So you go back again to the drawing board and, and do that. So, but this time round, we were successful with the southern white, pairing them up and getting that embryo ready. So we now know it's possible. So now we want to go and try it with the northern white.
Then that lands actually that theme of recovering key species.
Yes.
Is there anything else that we are doing in terms of recovering key species for that restoration of our ecosystem?
Yes, of course. The role of Kenya Wildlife Service is first and foremost to protect management and protection and provision of security to wildlife, as provided for in the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act 2013, which is what guides us at the moment. That's the act that we work with. And ours is to ensure that all species, but particularly iconic species, are protected. Recently, last year, we did a census of the animals, and particularly the iconic species, to make sure that we know what numbers we're looking after. Because there's no point saying you're protecting something, and yet you don't know what you're looking after.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did a census. I think it's the only one in the region that has ever been done, I believe even in Africa. Census have been done, but of specific species. This was an overall census. So, that is also one of the measures we're taking to be able to protect the species.
Sure.
Yes.
Poaching has been a big thing. In the last 50 years, it's been spoken about over and over.
Yes.
What is the current status with poaching, with law, with actually bringing some of these folks to book? Is it as big a problem today as it was 10, 20 years ago?
Let me take you back a bit. From around 1976, if I was to look at elephants alone, we had over 130,000 elephants in Kenya. By 1989, we had 16,000 because of poaching. That's how bad it was. However, today, we can proudly say our numbers have gone up, and this was confirmed in the last census. Our numbers have gone up to 36,000 elephants. And across the board, we've seen an increase in species of animals. So poaching as it was is not as big a threat for the iconic species in that we've been able to protect. Like now in 2020, for the first time, I think in 21 years, we had zero poaching of rhinos. Zero, not even a single one that we lost to poaching. So that shows that the efforts that we put to make sure that we protect certain species. However, what we're seeing increasing, and this is one of the biggest challenges that we are dealing with today, is the issue of bushmeat poaching. And ever since we started, COVID came about, that is the thing that has been the biggest challenge with us. And we've been sensitizing people, telling them, don't go there and eat this meat just because you think we can go and hunt in the bush and eat meat. Because there's a lot of the doctors will tell you there's a lot of danger in you eating wild, meat that is not, and in any case, we don't eat game. It's against the law in Kenya. So that is the biggest challenge that we've had, because we're dealing with our own people, going in there, assuming they can just go and hunt dik-diks, antelopes, and whatever it is, and trying to educate them as well that this is wrong. You don't do that.
General.
But now you see, I don't know.
No, go ahead, General.
Yeah. The kind of punitive decisions, or rather by judgments we're getting now, are helping us. Because before, it was just, as it were, not an important thing when you took somebody to court and said, we caught them with a dik-dik that they had actually killed.
Yeah.
And we also noticed that it also moved commercially to a much, much larger level. Whereas you could get someone with 2 dik-diks. Now we're getting lorry loads of dik-dik. That tells you clearly there's a business somewhere that is going on out there. Yes.
The question I wanted to ask is, there's always been this discussion about the conflict that humanity has with wildlife.
Yes.
Conflict that essentially arises from the need for space. Now, what role does KWS play in ensuring that these very communities who border the sanctuaries where we have our animals, what is done to get them to understand that this is a heritage that can be of benefit to them, and so that they should be the frontline protectors of this very resource?
Thank you. First and foremost, I want to remove a misnomer which people probably assume all the time. 2/3 of the wildlife in Kenya exists outside parks and reserves. 2/3 of our wildlife. It's only 1/3 that is in parks and reserves. So, for all intents and purposes, wildlife coexists with the humans, wherever they are. Okay, and I agree with you completely, Charles. There's the space that is Kenya is defined by a boundary. That's not going to change. The human population is increasing. We are working very hard to make sure that the wildlife population also increases. And there's limited space. And that is the reason why you find human-wildlife conflict is become such a big thing, and it's a problem, for our people. We don't like it when you hear a lion has attacked, some neighborhood and killed somebody, or an elephant has gone into a farm and killed someone. We also don't like that. It's not something that we enjoy to see or hear. And we do everything since I came to KWS to make sure that we respond quickly to the communities. Now, how do you then encourage human-wildlife coexistence, which is what I'm pushing for? Instead of looking at human-wildlife conflict, let's look at how humans and wildlife can coexist. And the idea here is to show people that there are ways you can actually coexist with wildlife. There's a project we started. It's still in its infant stages. But we've started with Bidco. Bidco want to sponsor certain areas, and we start with pilot projects where they can put sunflower in certain areas. Now, sunflower and elephants are not very good friends. The reason is because sunflower attracts bees, and bees and elephants are not very good friends. So what it does is you allow a corridor for the elephants to pass. Where the communities are, you put sunflower. Now, the beauty about it is that you have the sunflower, which they will come and give you the seeds and also harvest.
Right.
They are the bees. They will also encourage you. They will get communities, especially the youth, to be able to start bee farms. And they will buy the honey from the youth.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win-win for the community, and also allows the wildlife
to
by
pass.
creating those corridors to be able to go through. Unfortunately, like in Kitengela, people have built where the corridors are.
Yes.
So the wildlife will still come through there, because they have a fixed way of moving, and they will come through there. And when they do come through there, then you get the conflict.
But DG, these are already prescribed corridors. So the
Yes.
question is,
Yes.
when it comes to things like city planning, when it comes to things like agricultural planning,
Yes.
is there a symbiotic planning between KWS and other agencies that would deal with things like that? And then the planning side of things to say that, can we then avoid this future conflict and then bring about this coexistence? Does it happen?
Unfortunately, I must admit that does not happen. It doesn't happen that way. I wish it did, because it would make our life very easy at Kenya Wildlife Service. Unfortunately, land use planning we are not factored in per se when it comes to land use planning. And you realize that land has already been allocated to a certain community in an area where we come and say, don't do that, because that's a corridor. We're told, so where do you want these people to go? We will give them that land. Unfortunately, that's what's been happening. So we are continuously losing land that would otherwise have been corridors. But we're very, very grateful to the government and particularly the president, because recently we were allocated in the sheep and goat area near Athriba, 2,000 acres, which we now is to help, one, expand Nairobi National Park, and two, to create that corridor that was there, because then it can go through towards Swara Ranch and the Ilri area, Kapiti Plains, as we cut across now to go towards Amboseli, which was the original route. But then, of course, with time, now that has been occupied by people.
Part of the human conflict that arises with wildlife is not just what one sees in farming areas where you would find, should we say, animals in plenty. Government plans and capital projects also tend to be a problem. Because what do you do, for instance, if the government plans something like this railway that we have? There was a lot of hoo-ha about where the railway should go, where it should pass. Alternatives were provided. But in the end, it went through Nairobi National Park.
Yes.
Now, what scientists say, and this again came to the fore when there was discussion about Serengeti and the building of the road that was earmarked. That one brought about international hoo-ha. Okay? The question that my colleague Ndu asked, how serious does the national government take its planning when it comes to such huge national projects with what the policies of Kenya Wildlife Services has to maintain what it is that they have been given as part of their mandate to run?
Okay, I honestly wouldn't be able to speak for the planning side, but I can talk for the Kenya Wildlife Service side. We do, as much as possible, try to engage the other agencies with regard to areas which are, designated for wildlife, and show the dangers of what would happen if you are to either develop that area or give it to, as land allocation, because of how that is going to affect the people who are going to be there, in that space. And we do this all the time. We have been in engagement with quite a few of, especially the lands people, and the director of survey, who we talk to, continuously with, because of the areas we occupy and why those areas should be left the way they are. Unfortunately, I think there's also a political angle to it, in where it is maybe not even so much the planning side of the government, it's the political side of the whole political thing that sometimes comes and interferes. I can give an example of a place like, and I know it's happening right now, Mkurulo, in Chulu, near Chulu area. It's part of the park, and we actually had to step in and say, stop coming into the park. But then the people there had been encouraged by their political leadership and told, this is your land. Go there and sit there and occupy. So those are the kind of challenges that we get,
It will bring us to the question that I want to ask, but I want to ask that question after the break, which is about the value that the citizens of Kenya actually place on wildlife and wildlife conservation, whether it matches what the KWS promotes. Because when people say, okay, this is my land, I'm going to come here, I'm going to build, and you're being told it's a transport, it's a corridor for the wildlife. You're like,
Passage.
Corridor what? Where am I going? That's the question that then I want to ask you after the break. Do we see the value of wildlife as a people, as a value to me, or as a product that has been earmarked for people to come from abroad to come and see the animals and take photos and then go back and pay some people some money which I never see? This is a conversation we're having with retired Brigadier John Waweru, the Director General of the Kenya Wildlife Service. We're live on SpiceFM, KTN Home, and online 8:30. Time for us to take a quick break. We'll be back shortly. Spice. Tomorrow is World Wildlife Day, the 3rd day of March. It's International Day commemorating wildlife conservation worldwide. The theme this year is recovering key species for ecosystem restoration, and that's part of the conversation that we're having. So, Bonadiji, when we went to the break, I said, look, we talk about human-wildlife conflict all the time. You've told us 2/3 of our wildlife is actually outside of the protected areas, the national parks and game reserves. So we are living with the animals. CT had asked you, what efforts does the KWS take to make sure that the community sees wildlife as part of, things that we need to conserve, that we can get value out of, not just as tourism products which will earn us foreign exchange, but where we can also just interact with the animals? That dovetails into what you said. We have a political problem when it comes to conservation of wildlife, because there appears to be this kind of attitude that if we want to live here, we live here. The animals need to move away. If they don't move away, we eat them, and we make sure that they've moved away. Or if we're here and we're hungry and we're looking for cheap food, we go into the bush, get a dick, come eat, and we move on. Do you think that the people, Kenyans, actually view wildlife conservation the same way the KWS views wildlife conservation?
I don't think so at the moment, because most Kenyans, as you've aptly described, would see wildlife as an intrusion rather than something that they would want to embrace. Because, again, of the competition that I talked about earlier, the fact that I want to plow my land, or the land that I have, and be able to get a product out of it. Traditionally, that's what we've always done. But you see now, unfortunately, you also have wildlife within the space that you're talking about, although it has been there for the longest time. And we want to change the conversation. The reason is because we have gone elsewhere and seen models that are different. Recently, we were in South Africa. We went to look at the model that they have in South Africa. And I can tell you, from what we saw, you can actually see that the locals embrace their wildlife.
How do they do that?
They do that because there's something called the wildlife economy, something that we don't practice in Kenya. We don't hunt wildlife, and that's against the law. It was removed, I think, ever since 1989 because of the adverse effects on the loss of wildlife that we had at that time. I told you it moved from 135,000 to 16,000, for elephants. So because of that, hunting was stopped. The only kind of hunting, if you like, is allowed by law is KWS culling for purposes of protecting. So in other words, if an elephant attacks or any other animal, and it will be a danger to the personnel of Kenya Wildlife Service or the community, then by law we are allowed to take that animal down for the purposes of safety of the community and of course our own personnel. But hunting generally is not allowed, so you can't go and get a license to hunt. However, there's what we notice in South Africa, and which of course we'll now be talking about to introduce and to see how that can be able to work in Kenya, of course, given the circumstances here, is that they trade wildlife, particularly plain game and animals like buffaloes. You find they use buffalo to actually mate with cows. So then they get a better stock of livestock that is leaner and has better meat. So you see, when that kind of idea begins to come through, then people begin to realize also that they can trade in this wildlife. There are a lot of countries worldwide that would like to get live wildlife, sold to them, and they do in the Middle East, in Europe, and so we're talking about live animals, not the meat.
Right.
Okay. Now that's a conversation we are discussing. We're trying to look
this
at.
talks about now then breeding, because I mean,
Exactly.
you're just selling and you're not monitoring how you're breeding. It'll be like our donkeys.
Precisely. What you're going to do is to breed. So you'll have those animals not in fenced areas per se that are small. You're talking about areas 5,000 hectares, 10,000 hectares and more. So they'll still be free ranging as they are right now. But the only thing that you'll do is you'll be able to have them in an area where you can be able to then trade them off to a buyer elsewhere. Now, that may seem like we're going to sell all our animals and nothing's going to be left, but that's not true. If you look at the way the ecosystem works, is that if you're able to provide more space, animals have a way of reproducing. When they are all, confined in a space, they tend not to. They sort of like, I don't know, it's a genetic,
Essentially, you stress them.
Yes, you stress them so they don't want to produce. So it actually is a plus. So this is something new we're looking at. We haven't implemented it yet. But we feel that when we do that, then we will allow our people, the Kenyans, to be able to say, oh, wow, this is a resource that actually is profitable to me.
Sure.
But right now, when you tell the Kenyan, look after wildlife, which is always causing problems for them, they see it as a problem. They don't see it as a resource.
Yeah.
But we try very much, and we have teams that go on the ground all the time, to talk to the communities, show them that they can be a benefit and the coexistence can happen between yourselves and the animals, as long as we allow certain things to happen on the ground. Like now, those corridors we're talking about. Let's move away from those corridors. Allow them to come through. In some areas, we engage them to say, okay, in as much as that person who's coming from outside to invest is able to do so the community. You can also do that, where you can have resorts of your own, run by the community, owned by the community, which then can begin to benefit them.
What have you done, you as KWS and the Ministry of Tourism,
Yes.
to encourage more local investors in these areas? Because if you go into any community, you'll find if there's a conservancy, there's a non-Kenyan or non-indigenous Kenyan who is running it, who is involved in it, who understands the management of it. So basically, for very many indigenous Kenyans, if I just want to put it that way, this is a product that is for foreigners. Our wildlife is a foreigner's product. How can we Kenyanize this product?
One of the things that we've done at Kenya Wildlife Service is the Zuru Kenya Parks. This is something that we started slightly over a year ago. The reason why we started that is because we realized after the pandemic, all international visitors literally vanished because they couldn't come.
Yeah.
So then we said, now, what do we do as a service? How do we survive this? Because we need to have the income to be able to, for government, to be able to sustain these parks. So we turned this thing upside down. We started targeting the domestic market. And we've had success stories with the domestic market so far, in that right now we've had a 40% increase on what we had in 2019, pre-COVID, of domestic visitation. Because we've shown people, first and foremost, this product is not for the person out there. It's for you as well. You can actually enjoy this product. It's yours. And the more Kenyans embrace the product that Kenya Wildlife Service offers, the more they realize, actually, this is something that we can do. First and foremost, like in Nairobi National Park, an international visitor pays $43 to come into the park. A Kenyan pays 430 shillings. That's $4. Okay. So we were showing them this is not actually just set out for the international visitor. It is for you as a Kenyan to come and enjoy. And the more they come in, the more they realize there are spaces. Like now we're engaging a lot of local investors on the issue of the spaces that we have as Kenya Wildlife Service, to which they can actually, in a partnership, be able to say, we can be able to take care of this banda or look after this banda as a private entity.
Sure.
And I want to remove the idea that we are privatizing all our parks. And you had asked me that question.
Yeah.
What we are doing is a PPP, a public-private partnership, where we say this space we are giving to an investor, okay? And then we agree on the terms in which we're giving that space to an investor, so that investor then will then be able to put in their money, okay? And we give them a certain period, like say 20, 25 years, for them to recover their investment and go in there and set up a product that can be used by Kenyans and visitors from outside.
What is space in this particular case? Like a park, an entire park, Nairobi National Park, you give it to an investor?
No. Not the entire park. What we are talking about is that we have sites, bandas, hotels. Like now, for example, Voi Safari Lodge. That belongs to Kenya Wildlife Service. Serena Kilaguni. That belongs to Kenya Wildlife Service. And we have about 61 sites across the country within the parks that belong, are run by Kenya Wildlife Service. Other than the ones that are run on the outside by others. Yeah.
How can this be sustained and promoted so that we don't have to get to a situation whereby there's COVID or there's something else, then that you realize, hold on a minute, we actually have a domestic market here that can sustain this thing. I continue to use the example of North America, whose year-on-year fluctuates between 70 to 86%, but of their tourists, 70 to 86% are domestic tourists. They don't have to rely on the globe. I mean, don't come, it doesn't matter. They're going to get the revenue that they need, that they would need from the local market, because they have promoted it and they have made sure that they've been able to sustain it. And they don't even have the kind of variety in wildlife alone that Kenya alone has. So what can be done? There are 22 national parks in Kenya. 23, right? Do Kenya, beyond knowing that they exist and the people who come from outside to see, what is the encouragement to get people in the different areas? Because they're widespread across the country. I don't think you could drop a pin and you wouldn't be able to find a national park in somebody's area.
Absolutely.
That they could go visit on a day, on a weekend, on holiday, children, excursions, school trips, things like that. And I think that would contribute directly to this thing that Eric was asking, what KWS is doing. Does it then match the people's outlook or awareness of what is there? There are many people who have never even visited or have no idea that something like this exists in their area.
Absolutely.
So how can it be sustained and pushed to make sure that you don't have to wait until COVID happens to start to push the domestic agenda?
Thank you very much for that question. That is the specific reason why we started Zuru Kenya Parks. That was exactly why. And I can tell you right now, 80% of the visitation that we have in our parks today is domestic. And pre-2019, it was the other way around. It was only about 10% or 20% that we were getting from the domestic market. So already we're beginning to turn that wheel, so that we can be able to get the domestic market.
Now, did you do this in conjunction with the Ministry of Tourism, or is it just a purely KWS initiative?
This is in conjunction with the Ministry of Tourism, because we are, part of you know, the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife. So we did it as a Kenya Wildlife Service initiative, but with the backing of the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife.
The reason why I ask this
yes,
is because it looks like we wait for a crisis in order to do something we ought to be doing anyway. I remember in Mombasa when we had what was referred to as the coastal tribal clashes in the Kayabombo. Tourism collapsed almost literally.
yes,
And I then saw the initiative by the Ministry of Tourism to get locals to actually take an interest in the wares that were offered. And it was an amazing, in fact, it's a success story.
yes.
And then somehow over time, it dwindled, it was forgotten, and we had to wait for yet another crisis. And to have you at the helm of KWS to say, folks, you know, we really need to get these locals to go to these places. And yet, when Eric mentioned conservancies, the very nature of conservancies is that locals are involved with the investors.
Yes.
Now, conservancies are a success story.
Yes.
So how is it then that what the initiative that you have cannot be something continuous? So whether you have COVID or not, instead of talking about 80, we talk about 90% of Kenyans.
Yes.
I can give you a hint. That 400 shillings is too much.
You feel it's too high, City?
It's too high.
Well, explain. Explain why you think it's high, and then we ask him to explain why they arrived at
rationale for
4.
that.
I am sure there's a rationale
460.
for it, but why
Yes.
I'm telling you it is too high. I'm looking at the ordinary Kenyan whose basic income per day is something like 200 shillings a day.
And if you put that against, for example, the average American, who, by the way, make up, as just as an example, who make up the bulk of the folks who are going out on these touristic excursions. They're the ones who are going. The nurse, the doctor, the teacher, the lawyer, the whatever, the ones who own their small businesses are the ones going on these holidays.
Because they have a huge middle class. Now, I am saying, even for school children and school trips, I know they're highly subsidized. And that's the reason why school children are able to go with those huge buses that they go with.
Yes.
Now, I'm saying there are many simple wananchi who will go to Nairobi National Park with a bus or with public transportation. Now, if that amount was reduced beyond 400 shillings, because 400 shillings is a lot of money for a simple Kenyan mwananchi, especially in this time, my thoughts.
And this is just entry.
Yeah, entry,
There's
yes.
transport to
Yes.
Langata. There is what
Transport from
you're
Langata.
taking children. So this is 460 for the adult. Then there's amount for the children.
And then the children
there's-
see what...
and they want to eat.
Yes, not only do they want to eat, they want to drink, and they want to
And then they want to
layer
go
Yes.
back home.
What I'm saying is, the thinking behind that reduction is excellent, but if you look at the volume of people you could attract with that reduced fare, I think this message of it being a Kenyan thing would become obvious, because everybody, when
go.
people, instead of planning to go and just hang out at Uhuru Park, people are going to hang out in Nairobi National Park.
Indeed.
General.
Actually, the reaction is different. Let me tell you, because we are on the ground and we actually see.
Yes.
Kenyans actually were coming to the parks expecting to pay the $43.
Oh.
That's what they assumed was the price, until they're told it's 430, and they say, "Goodness, only that? Are you people okay? Are you going to make any money if you only charge us 400 shillings?" That's the reaction we are getting from Kenyans. It's not that they think it's expensive, and you know, during the COVID period from 2020 to 2021, you know, we cut the prices by 50%. So the adult was paying 210
Yep.
to get into the park. Now, that built the volumes significantly. But even when we now rolled back to
Pre-COVID
the, you know,
rates.
in January this year, we rolled back to 100%. In other words, the 430 for Nairobi. Still, the Kenyans kept coming. And I can tell you, during the time for February 14th,
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's.
Sorry, that's the word that
That's
was
right.
That time, yes.
It's a
I
pressure
think it's
point
just
for a lot
because
of
of
folks.
where I normally operate.
Could be the pressure, we understand.
Yes. during that period,
You had more people.
we had more people coming through. Actually, the parks were chock-a-block. Everywhere you went, whether it was Nairobi National Park, whether it was Amboseli, whether it was Impala in Kisumu, everywhere. And what we are doing with the Zuru Kenya parks is that we are actually now specifically going for certain parks instead of just the Zuru Kenya parks as a general name. We're saying Zuru Amboseli, Zuru Impala, Zuru, Mount
Meru.
Elgon.
Ruma National Park.
Ruma. Yes, exactly. I know that's close to your heart.
Yes.
Yes, Zuru.
He did his Valentine's there.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing now. So that, and then we're telling our people, this is another thing, another initiative. The rangers we have are able to share pictures, videos with us on our daily and weekly basis from each individual park. And then what we do is populate it within our site for the Zuru Kenya parks. So when you click, you will see new images and new things that are coming from various parts, marine parks, terrestrial parks in various areas. So we sort of spice it up for Kenyans to see. This is what you'll see when you get there. This is what is there. Like now, for example, do you know in Mount Elgon that there are elephants that live in caves?
Read about it.
Yes. We have
live in
elephants.
caves?
Yes, that's where they live.
That's very good.
In Mount Elgon. So, those are the kind of experiences that Kenyans, the ordinary Kenyan may not know.
In fact, there's a comment from Kipto in
Yes.
West Pokot. He says, in West Pokot, we have the Nasolot Game Reserve.
Yes.
And he says, and you can confirm things, that they have the world's largest elephants in this particular national.
Absolutely, they do.
So tell us about it. So how can we get to know about these things? Okay, so how do I get to Nasolot Game Reserve? How do because we're talking about promotion.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're saying that you've started this idea of promoting the various products that we have in the country and saying you can come and it's accessible, and the reason why I should drive from Nairobi to go all the way to West Pokot to look for the Nasolot Game Reserve because it has the world's largest elephants. Why I should go to Meru National Park because it has both it has this type of giraffe or this zebras. Why? I mean, do we have a lot of that effort being made?
Absolutely. The campaign, which I said I launched about a year ago, of Zuru Kenya Parks, is exactly that. That's what we're trying to do on social media, and now we want to take it to the next level. We want to go live so that we can then be showing videos and clips so that people can see what is happening in several parts, various parts of the country. Then that way, Kenyans get to know what is there. Like now, Marsabit National Reserve is a beautiful, pristine area. Absolutely brilliant, But you have to go there to see. And what we're trying to do at KWS is to ensure that we tell people this is there. We're getting a lot of people driving to Chalvi Desert from Nairobi. Now that the roads are good, they can actually drive on a tarmac road. They go to Chalvi, and while they're in Chalvi, they say, "Okay, let's drive across and go to Marsabit and go see the park." Those are the kind of things that we're trying to do with the Zuru campaign, so that people can see and understand, actually feel, as much as possible on social media what it is that we have out in these parks.
As you conclude the conversation, Bona Waweru, there is a comment that you made on not privatizing, but PPPs, private sector, KWS, on managing some of the bandas and facilities in the parks. Somebody says, ask the DG why they've cancelled the recent tender for investors to come and set up. Cancelled twice in various places.
I think it was only cancelled once before, just shortly as I came in, because I realized that what we had done was not going to give us the product that we wanted. When you have a specification that is only going to keep that product as it is, it's not going to help the situation, because you're just keeping something that didn't grow before and it's not going to grow now because of the way it's specified. So what we're looking for in the partnerships are people who can then be able to spruce up these areas, bring them up to an international standard, and one that is acceptable. You see, we have competition around our region. Tanzania, we're competing with them. Rwanda, Uganda, South Africa. We need to be able to have a product where you can say this is equal or better than that which is given in South Africa or in other areas. So we can't be going with a standard that is low. We must bring it up to a standard where we can then compete with other areas.
Good job that you're doing there. You have a lot of work in terms of promoting the product and keeping promoting. For example, somebody says there's no reason why I should be going to Dubai to see dolphins. Well, I can go to the coast of Kenya to see dolphins. Or I can go to the coast of Kenya to actually see the whales coming to the coast of Kenya, to Watamu, once every year. Thank you very much. Retired Brigadier John Waweru is the Director General of the Kenya Wildlife Service. We'll be having a conversation on our wildlife product, and whether it's still something that we want to go and see. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. We'll be live on KTN Home, but we want to take a break on KTN Home. The conversations continue on SpiceFM around the country: Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, and Malindi, and also on YouTube and Facebook. SpiceFM KE.
Spice FM.